Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank, New York branch, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding is provided by grants from C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Rosenthal & Rosenthal, Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, Titan Capital, the Witkoff Group.
Welcome to the Stoller Report. My name is Michael Stoller. Everybody is interested in rentals, condominiums. That's all that's happening in New York and New Jersey. That's where it is. People want to move into the city. People want to live in Jersey City. They want to go to Hoboken. So really, what's happening in this marketplace? Where do people go? Who do they lease with? Who do they buy from? Who do they want to deal with? So today I've assembled a group of 6 individuals who are developers, owners of residential product in the tri-state region. Jim Simmons, a partner at Apollo Real Estate Advisors. Louis Dubin, the president and CEO of the Athena Group. Jamie Lefrak, a principal at the Lefrak Organization. Ken Horn, president and founder of Alchemy Partners. Joe Tall, founder and president of Tall Prop Equities. And last but not least, a returnee, David Kramer, a principal at the Hudson Companies Incorporated.
Thank you.
I got it right. So let's get to the subject, the condominiums. The newspapers, with the exception of me, are saying that the world is coming to an end on condominiums. Everybody, people are slow, or people are kicking the tires. What's really happening in the condo market?
I'll start.
That's good.
I think that there's a lot more talk than reality in that statement. I can tell you from our experience, we've one condominium project now that we're still moving 30 units a month, and we'll sell out of that one just like we sold out of the prior one. And I think you have to really think about the supply and demand metric of this at large. New York as a city has 4 million housing units. So if you added another 30,000, which is our whopper year here, it's really just a tiny, tiny speck of the total supply that's out there. So you're not breaking that basic economic fact.
But aren't we talking? You're talking about a development in Jersey City where it's a different price point than a Ken Horn Alchemy property, or David Kramer, J Condo and Dumbo, or Central Park North. Isn't that a different situation? $500 a foot is really, in this market, it's worthwhile for someone to possibly buy a unit for $500 a foot as opposed to renting in maybe one of your apartment buildings or one of your apartment buildings.
Well, I think there's the concept all politics is local, and we want to make sort of macroeconomic judgments about the condo market. And if you talk about each of our projects,
we're not going to Florida. We're talking about New York, New Jersey. We're not talking about loose developments in Vegas, Washington. We're over here.
Even within the grand mosaic of the New York metropolitan region, you have to look at submarkets. You have to look at what the basis is for each developer. For instance, we have a project we're working on now that will probably go to market in the fall in Bushwick, where we're hoping to get $500 a foot. And I do not go to sleep worrying about getting $500 a foot. If you're a condo developer and you need to get $1,400 a foot in a fringy neighborhood in Manhattan, you should have some sleepless nights.
Would you believe that Bushwick is not a fringy neighborhood?
Didn't you see the New York Times magazines? Bushwick is the, when you look for...
I only read the paper once in a while.
That's when I interview prospective employees at the Hudson companies, I always ask them, so, what do you think is, a good hot neighborhood? And what, the answer that 10 years ago was Williamsburg or the East Village is now East Williamsburg or Bushwick or Prospect Heights. So, but getting back to my point, you asked about the condo market, and, you have different developments at different times in the cycle. And, a lot of projects have already sold. Today.
Let's talk about today.
Today, I think that if you have the right product that's correctly priced, that is special or affordable, that those units move. If I had a building today that was made up only of studio apartments, I would have no problem selling it. If I had a building that was all made up of special apartments, no matter how aggressively those units were priced, they would sell well. It's the cookie cutters, it's the commodity apartments, it's the ones where there are 20 other units in a certain neighborhood in different developments that are not selling at the same absorption we've seen in the past couple of years, which is only rational.
Plus in Manhattan, you have such unique supply and demand dynamics for apartments in Manhattan that you don't have in any other city, probably in the country, any other city maybe in the world. That even an oversupply, as Jamie says, it's a small percentage of the total. Even if there is an oversupply for a certain period of time, for example, in New York City, the demand internationally is so high, supply normally has an opportunity to get taken up in not too long a time period. And I think if mortgage rates stay cooperative and people can still get a mortgage that starts with a 6 in the 6% plus range, I think any brief oversupply you're going to see will be absorbed at pretty good numbers.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Liv.
I was just going to say, following up on that, if you have the value proposition today, which I think you were getting at somewhat, and the consumers today are shopping. Your home buyers today are very knowledgeable about many of the different projects in that market or sub-market. So they're knowledgeable, and if you have a price proposition that they feel is compelling, you'll move product. But I do agree, we're moving product at a slower pace than we were certainly a year and a half ago. The good news is the price points really haven't dropped much, and we don't see how it really drops precipitously because construction costs are so high.
Well,
I think there's.
I'm sorry.
You were next.
Okay. I think from our point of view, I think to complement what people have said is there's clearly a flight to quality, and there's clearly going to be a
And to value.
And to value. And I think over the last 2 years, obviously in the Manhattan market, the amount of renovation and the scale of renovation and the expectation as to what's in the apartments has changed. Probably 2-3 years ago, you could probably not get away with doing certain finishes which you need to do now because there's more product on the market. That being said, the market is still stable. I think one of the issues that's come up is over the last 2 years or so, if somebody bought a piece of property for $500 a foot and they had to build, or at $450 a foot, then their break-even point is at a level that may not be sustainable in this particular market. But those of us who bought correctly 2 years ago, even 18 months ago, and are able to price their units at a certain level that the deal still makes sense relative to the buying public, and I think there's still a very good market out there.
I think that what you find today, though, is that there are many markets that are competing with each other that heretofore that wasn't the case. So you have a project on 110th Street or Central Park North. We're selling at 10 West End Avenue. 2 or 3 years ago, a buyer would say, I want to be in Midtown or I want to be in downtown. Today you have Dumbo, you have Williamsburg, you have Harlem, you have alternatives, and those alternatives are not
Jersey City, make sure.
Jersey City.
Right.
Jersey City, that's
Thank
right.
you.
That's
From
right.
both of us, right.
Those alternatives today are not that different. We're building the same product, we're building for the same customer, and people are more knowledgeable about those other markets.
That speaks to the fact that, as a general statement, I'm sure we'd all agree there are no more bad neighborhoods. That there are neighborhoods which are disadvantaged by their transportation metrics. Transportation can be a real problem if you can't get near a subway or a bus or a ferry or a light rail or whatever. Then it's a little tough. But there's nothing that's so blighted that people don't want to live there or can't enjoy some kind of a nice life and have a perfectly happy existence.
That certainly is true in Harlem. I mean, we did a condo on 119th and Lenox that we sold out for just under $700 a foot, and people kept asking me, who bought condos on 119th and Lenox? And I said, we got condo buyers, as you're saying, there's a crossover in neighborhoods, from almost every other neighborhood in the city. People came from the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, Tribeca, Chelsea, Soho, Hell's Kitchen, you name it. people bought apartments in this location in Harlem from other neighborhoods. They bought for price. They bought because they could get 4-bedroom apartments with granite kitchens, wood-burning fireplaces, ducted central AC, washer-dryers, hardwood strip floors, crown moldings, all pre-war detailing, 24-hour doorman, blah, 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 all the features, for $1 million plus or minus.
But when the market is averaging $1,150, $1,200 a foot in Manhattan, $700 a foot feels like a buy.
For brand new, mint condition luxury.
If there's not a crime problem, and nobody talks about crime anymore, then then that helps in these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I think the
Absolutely.
difficult factor is when you have a product in a neighborhood which is not Park Avenue, not Fifth Avenue, not Central Park West, where someone's trying to get $1,800, $1,900 a foot.
Yeah.
Even Fifth Avenue, I mean, speak to what's happening over at the Stanhope project. I mean, what's what's the scuttlebutt?
No, I think what Jamie brings out is a very important fact. The Zeckendorf project is doing great. The Stanhope is hurting because it has certain situations. A land lease, 1. 8-foot ceilings, 2.
Yeah.
3, the higher floors look over the museum, but they also look over the electrical systems and the plumbing systems of the museum. And it's rather difficult. 823 Park Avenue, after a year and a half of not selling a unit, has finally sold some units. It's all based on what that product is. I mean,
It's
what you did.
Qualitative. And that's what I think part of the theme is, qualitative and value. The consumer knows today, and they should know, and good for them. I mean, there are educated buyers out there. There isn't the froth and frenzy. People are shopping. People are taking their time, and the better product and the better architects and the better designs will continue to outperform. And you take an architect.
I think architects are still, people are paying attention to architects. I'm still surprised nobody cares who the sponsor is, and that's been my experience.
What do you mean?
See, David, I disagree.
Really?
I will
I
disagree.
disagree with that as well.
I will disagree because I will tell you that over the building we just finished at 121 West 19th Street, of the 67 units we sold, which were sold out in 4 days in May of '05, which is never happening again. That was a pure anomaly in the market, and no one should have ever expected that.
And it was because everybody asked who the sponsor was. That's
No,
why it sold
but-
in 4 days.
No, it was the car that he gave with the, and the Vespa. It was a combination.
No, Vespa's on 15th Street.
It
But I
was
will.
the
But I will.
Alchemy antique car.
No, but David, I will tell you
Jim
that
tried.
that 4 buyers were from 2 of her other projects. They lived there for 3 years.
I don't doubt that.
And they sold and they made money
That's
and then
fair.
they moved on to another property.
No,
So I think the reputation of the developer does matter. I think people ask.
No, I think if you've been through a purchase, then you know whether you've had a good experience or a bad experience, and then you can brand yourself to some extent with repeat customers. And we've done that. We've sent postcards from our projects to our prior customers. I think most people who walk in the door of a sales office who have not had experience buying an apartment they view the experience as if they're buying a Honda. They're just assuming that it's going to run beautifully. There's going to be a 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty, and that the process will go smoothly, and the construction will be completed in a timely manner. And a lot of people are shocked when that doesn't happen. And yet, but I don't see that discrimination in the marketplace.
Your early adopters, the people that come in early on a ground-up construction project, meaning you've got a hole or a piece of dirt. The ones that buy in early either very much want to be in that area and would fall into your categorization, or have really done their homework. They're putting their money up a year and a half before they're going to take delivery, and they really do the work today. In our experience, the early adopters, when you have a product up, there's probably less of that because they can kick the tires, they can look at the Honda, they can test drive it and the rest of it. But when you're selling air, before you've actually built something, and if you're doing significant pre-sales, I think you have to have somewhat of a reputation and a track record.
It's also about price points too. How many people are spending $1,200 a foot that are first-time home buyers? It's not a lot. A lot of people are trading up. They've been through the experience before. They're better educated. They know whose product has reputations for what. So our 10 West End Avenue product, it's doing well because of what we did at Time Warner Center and because of our reputation with that product. And that's why we purposely have
It says
our
that
sales
on the
center.
sign, doesn't it? It says from the people that
That's what it
brought you.
says.
But I'll give you a good example, because in that market today, you have 10 West End Avenue, you have the Element next door, you have 255 Hudson, they call it, which is
255 West 60th.
255 West 60th, otherwise known as the Hudson. You have Veronica Hackett's project on 70th. You have about 8 different products. So what differentiates buyer? You know, they have to feel something. I mean, they walk in there. Are they going to deal with the Toro College product over there,
right,
which is one element,
with
and the sophisticated with the school in the building over
and
there,
the garages. Let's not forget that particular street. You know, Time Warner certainly brought the neighborhood to a different level, but that particular street traditionally have been repair garages.
That's right.
That's why I turned down that site.
we were
very thinking there's no way I could get 750
well,
a
and
foot
you had
for
a
that.
school, and you had a schoolyard. You had a schoolyard, you know, where one of your major views is looking out onto the schoolyard.
And there was BSA risk. But I mean, when we started selling J Condo in Dumbo, people would walk into our sales office with the brochures from the Nexus, from Beacon Tower, from 70 Washington, and they were clearly shopping. And you know, they were comparing finishes, square footages, and prices.
Did you have an actual model, or the model was
Sure.
off-site?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, one thing that's changed in the world now that you expect to get these kind of sales prices is that you have to deliver the product, and when you're selling from floor plans and you have a hole in the ground, you know, we basically try to fill in every detail. So the flooring in the apartments was the floor of the sales office. The windows of the building, and these are triple pane, you know, major windows, were the windows in the sales office. We built out the kitchen. We built out 3 bathrooms. So you try and, you know, create every detail. And then the buyers would go around, would compare everything from views and ceiling heights to finishes and prices. But, you know, to beat my dead horse, you know, I don't think that they cared about who the developer was. And there were, you know, differences among the developers of these projects.
You know, we talk about condos, but unfortunately, and anyone who's been watching my shows for all these years knows that I'm a big advocate of affordable housing, and not everybody can buy a condominium. Even in David Kramer's $500 in Bushwick, even I prefer to probably live in Jersey City for $500
Thank you, Michael.
a foot than Bushwick.
Wait till you see our
Even
finishes,
6.
Michael.
Okay, or
still buy
6.
from us at $570 in Jersey City
Yeah.
at the A.
But let's remember, not everyone can buy a condominium. You know, you know, you need money. I mean, you need some money down. You have to have a job. You know, you're a working person. So where are those people going?
Can I ask one question of this very esteemed group here, which obviously has
It's a very nice comment,
experience
esteemed group.
in condominiums? Who here actually likes building condominiums? Who which of us prefers to do it, enjoys to do it? You do.
Well, that's the only thing we do.
Huh.
We don't. We've done 19 buildings in the last 5 years. We don't build rental buildings. We own some unsold shares, probably about 200 some odd units in various buildings, unsold units. But no, it's a different business. It's different. I mean, our business model is we build, we trade. We're traders. We go in, we build an asset, we trade it. We don't want to have one unit left the day that TCO is issued.
Are there any apartments that you sold? I'm sorry to take the question. Are there
sorry.
any apartments you sold 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago that you wish you had back?
Absolutely. In
All
fact,
of them. All of them?
yeah, of course. I mean, Jenny, that's always been a discussion in the office. Is, well, you know what? Let's hold on to 10% of them, right? Because we sell them below the market, so let's hope the market will go up.
In all, you know, we look at that business, the condo side of the business, as inventory and as, you know, our widget, as our product. And at the end of the day, I mean, today it's pretty tough to make an 18 to 20 margin. We look, you know, our key metric in what we do is margin, which almost sounds like a manufacturing business. In the old days, when I first started in this business, that margin number was probably 25, no, I'm not talking IRR, just pure margin, 25 to 30%. So if you do enough production, it becomes a very nice, you know, net operating income type of a business if you look at it as an operating business. Although true wealth accretion, I think, occurs when you're a long-term holder.
Right. Which is why he was asking the question.
Of course.
And,
No, well, honestly,
Well, everyone has a
I
different
wasn't,
niche in
although
the
we've got
market.
long-term holders here too who probably should weigh in. But I mean, for me, it's, yeah, of course, you wish anything you sold, you wish you had it back. But more to the point, the process of doing a condominium is so much more daunting than building a rental building. You know, not only in terms of the level of finish that you have to create, but the expectation of the buyer, and everything has to be perfect. And if they don't like it, you get sued. And even if they do like it, you get sued. And you have to file
And you know, Jamie, that's a very interesting. One of my classes at NYU I had a number of people on there, and they basically said, I'm never going to build a condo again. I think it was Steve Witkoff who said that I don't want to get involved. There's always a potential lawsuit.
But you know what?
They're always unhappy.
Michael, yes. Yes. And the wealthier the clientele, probably, the greater happenstance of that actually occurring. But you try to prevent it. And you work with your buyers individually, you go through the punch list, you go through the building. Every building you do, you put in more and more controls. More and more engineers look at it, more and more people look at it, and you just try to manage it. It's a risk. It's a risk inherent in the business.
But I'd like to get back to my situation, okay? There's a certain population who can afford to buy. The larger portion of the population who watch my show, who live in New York, have to live in an apartment. They can live in one of the thousands and thousands of units of the Lefrak organization, or the 10,000 of the Apollo, or the 4,000 or 5,000 of the Tall Prop. These people have to find a place. They can't afford to, you know. They're policemen, they're school teachers, and everything else.
Well, you know, of the apartments we have, actually, it's not quite 5,000 yet, about 3,000. About 70–75% of our business is actually affordable housing. We own HUD buildings, we own tax credit buildings regulated by HDC, HPD, HUD, and a lot of those buildings are going to remain affordable housing for the foreseeable future. And you do get rent increases from HUD. Actually, in Harlem, you get rent increases because market rents are going up, and you get something, you know, close to market rents. A lot of our business is affordable housing, and you're right. A cop, a school teacher, someone who's making a middle class income, maybe they used to live in Stuytown, maybe 5 years ago they won't be living in Stuytown, but they're in Harlem, where we have all of our buildings, there's a tremendous amount of affordable housing. Not every building is affordable housing, but there's
what is affordable? You know, people always say there's a premise of what is affordable. I mean, people used to say you're not supposed to spend more than 30% of your income on housing. Unfortunately, people are spending 50% of their income on housing.
Well, actually, I would make a similar argument to what you did, but sort of on the opposite side, is that I would argue that in Harlem there is very little market rate rental housing.
Exactly.
If at all.
80–90% of what's there is affordable, being defined as apartments that either sell or rent for less than they would under free market conditions.
That's right.
And there's a tremendous amount being developed now. There are a lot of programs to do it. Now, not everyone in Harlem, for example, is a neighborhood we're familiar with, can afford to live in every single apartment. That's true in every apartment, in every neighborhood in New York City. There are plenty of buildings in other neighborhoods in New York City I can't afford to live in. But that's not to say every building in Harlem is affordable. There's a lot of affordable housing. There's also room for a building like 111 Central Park North, which is going to be one of the great apartment buildings, I think, on Central Park in New York City, selling for about half of what you'd pay on any of the other streets bordering the park. That's going to be some of the best housing in Harlem, and Harlem should have some examples of the best housing, as well as a lot of examples of affordable housing.
But it's not only Harlem. You know, you go to Queens, where Lefrak City is, and you go to the Pride of the Yankees, you go to the Bronx. I mean, if you went to the Concourse 30, 40 years ago, you had apartments like you were talking in Harlem. You have these...
There's no working person in New York who cannot afford to live in Lefrak City with one-bedroom rents at $700 a month. You know, and up, I would say that appeals to quite a broad spectrum of working people.
So somebody today can find an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment in Lefrak City for $700 a month?
7 and change, yeah. Is that shocking? Rent stabilization over time, 3.5%.
You don't know what to say.
There is quite a lot of housing out there. You know, I think that, fortunately or unfortunately, there isn't necessarily the price you want to pay in the exact spot you want to live, and it may be that,
but you know,
on the corner of Fifth Avenue and 72nd Street, there is a $700 apartment.
What I'm happy, and I know my audience is, you know, you can go to Lefrak City, where you have great transportation nearby, you have great shopping, probably the best shopping in Queens, and you can be there, and you can really be in affordable housing. Now you can go
that's not government affordable housing. It's privately owned and operated, and so it comes with a standard of servants and a standard of neighbors who are often, you know, quite pleasant to experience.
Can you buy a building? Could you buy a building and rent a one-bedroom for $700?
No.
I think they're
you have to have a very low basis.
When did you acquire your buildings? Okay, so you can't buy a building today and rent it at $700 and make a return for your investors.
No, what you can do, if the existing rent is $700.
The existing rent is $700. But what you can do, though, is you can take that $700 average rent and you can take that building and put capital improvements into the building and as units naturally roll, improve those units and get maybe $1,100, $1,200 a month.
But $1,100 to $1,200 is still an affordable price for a working person or a husband and wife.
It is, absolutely.
And
Delano
that's our
Village, you're
market.
doing that every day of the week. You probably have studios and ones that are renting for, what, $1,000, $1,200, $1,400?
Between our low is about $1,100, our high is probably $1,500 a month. And these
That's
are
affordable
brand
housing.
new, fully renovated, granite countertops, the same standard that he was talking about, stainless steel. We're doing quality housing in places where people before didn't think that people would move to if you created it.
But your new sleek towers that everyone identifies as the new housing stock, you're in for, if your basis is really low, you're in for $900 a foot.
Yeah,
and
the
if
new
it's not,
construction is
Louis,
construction
certainly
doesn't
not
work.
affordable.
I have a question. In the city of New York, not
Yes.
Manhattan, in the city of New York, how many new rental housing buildings have been built over the last 2 years?
Probably as many as you can count on one hand.
Correct.
Yeah,
But there
it's
are a lot
amazing
of-
if you look at the Sunday Times and you go from the condo and co-op section to the rental section. Now, 8 years ago, they were comparable. You knew when you hit the rental section because there were column ad after column ad after column ad. And I curiously look at the rental section on Sundays to say, well, who was able to make a rental project work? You know, who are these people building rental buildings? Because now they're down to a very few.
Lenny Litwin.
And it's projects that have
Long-term
been
holder.
owned for a long time.
Bills
You know,
for
lots of family ownership or specific situation. You know, Bruce Becker did a tremendous job building a mark rate rental on Roosevelt Island called the Octagon, and
It's
you know,
the
like
Roosevelt
A
Island.
few years ago, Cameron Hakeem.
yeah, like you know, Battery Park City. But it's not the.
But
it's
as
not
Lou
the typical
says,
project.
you can count it on one or two hands.
But,
exactly.
but the ironic thing now is that on certain projects that you can do, with rental rates going up as high as they are, you have a little bit of a cushion in terms of a downside rental scenario in some of the condos, if bought correctly.
Even with subsidy today, we have two projects in-house that we'd really like to make work as an 80-20. You know, and have a real portion that is affordable housing.
For my audience, 80-20 means 80% of market rate, 20% are controlled under like between 40 to 80% of the area median income.
We can't make the numbers work yet on an 80-20. We're getting close in Jersey City because the construction costs are less. And it's just very hard to make a reasonable yield or return on investment in rental today with the pricing of land and construction.
Right, there are a few rental buildings. They're being built as hybrids, and it's a condo and a rental, and the condominium sales buys down the basis so that you can do a rental. And that's not a bad business model because then you're left at the end of the day with a rental, which is what some of us would want from
Like the hotel
as a business
condo.
model.
That's interesting you mentioned that because we have a lot of buildings in Harlem that we bought over the past 8 or 9 years that we have a very low basis in. So in some of them we filed or are filing condo plans on them. Some of the units have been vacated, renovated, and some are decontrolled and can be sold. Some are rent stabilized and rent controlled and cannot be sold. We're filing condo plans. We're going to sell 15%, maybe a little bit more, pay down the debt, and then we'll sell whatever number of units the market will accept as condos and rent the rest. And that's a very good hybrid model.
But if
Well,
you
is
stick
that,
it-
is that a new? That's an interesting business model because on properties we do the same analysis now. We said because you say, well, why don't we hold on to units? So there's a part of us that says, you know what, that's not a bad model.
I'm going to give you an example. On my other show, I had Arun Bhatia, and he built a building, a mixed-use building, where he had Marymount College on the first 32 floors, and then on the next 20 floors, he built, everybody thought, a rental. He built it as a separate condo, and some of the units were never put into a rental market. They were always a rental market, and now what he's doing is he's taking out a certain portion, like the 15% or 20% now, to condominiumize. He has 3 different condominium approaches. So he's always going to have a rental, and he's going to be able to, as he says, increase the value because the rental values are up there, and the apartments there start, and these are the rentals, they start on the 32nd to the 52nd floor.
But the issue with your example is how does the buyer, if it's only 20%, get an end loan? If you're only in for 20%, I would think that would be the challenge.
I find that a lot of banks now will lend with virtually almost no pre-sales. Now these are lower priced
They'll
apartments. Maybe half a
they may
million.
provide a commitment, but will they close?
But on a resale,
so.
well, we also have to remember that not too long ago, 10 years ago, no bank would lend in a building unless it were 50%
Right.
sold.
Yeah.
I find that to be true though now.
Now.
It's definitely
now.
not true.
But the no, of course it's
I
not
think
true.
we're going back to more of that model.
Right, no, but the question is, will that ever happen again? Because I know at one particular point, there was a lawsuit that was brought by members of a co-op corporation. This is probably speaking about lawsuits, right? About 11 or 12 years ago, where the sponsor intentionally took a rent-controlled building, sold 15%, declared the plan effective, and his modus operandi was that when units became vacant, they were out of stabilization, went to market.
Right.
And so when a couple of people tried to resell their units, lo and behold, they couldn't get end loans. So they brought an action claiming when a plan is set forth, the sponsor has an obligation to attempt to sell units.
That's right.
Attempt to sell units. Now, it was a pretty large litigation which was ultimately settled. That never went to fruition, and the way it was settled is that the sponsor obligated himself to sell 2 or 3 a year.
In that one case.
In that one case. Right. So I haven't seen
unless you disclose in the offering plan that you're not planning to sell all of the apartments.
But even so, because that's a new special risk disclosure, it's got to go in, and it was precipitated by this particular case. But it would be interesting if the market flips and you've got 15-20% sold and people want to sell, what happens? I mean, this particular point, I agree with you. That's not the case. But who's to say that will remain that way?
You recently bought a building, which was a condo, 15%, right?
That's correct. That's correct. In East New York, speaking of how there are no more bad neighborhoods, but this was a condo, former Mitchell-Lama, that sold about 17 or 18% of the units and stayed that way for the past 10 or 12 years. And as East New York has improved, we saw an opportunity with our operating partners to go in and put some cash into the asset, renovate units, and sell them at affordable prices.
What is the going comp for East New York, Mitchell-Lama?
Going comp, well, I can tell you what I think we'll probably market them at, but they'll be somewhere between $250 and $300, $350 for a 2-bedroom.
A square foot or dollars?
No,
$1,000.
$1,000. $1,000.
So you're talking about $300 a foot.
About $300 a foot.
$300 a foot for a building which is how old?
The building was built in the 60s.
So let's look at it this way: somebody can buy a 2-bedroom apartment for $300,000. That situation, if you equate that with property taxes and maintenance, it might pay for that. It's more advantageous for that person to have ownership than as opposed to even remain in a left-rack building in Queens.
On an after-tax basis, you're right.
But it's just a question of how long somebody has had to save for the down payment and what government programs are available to a first-time buyer to help mitigate that cost. So what you have in $750 a month rental apartments are people who are busy saving up or people whose life circumstances will prevent them from ever being able to save up and buy something.
We, in our project, we're probably going to end up with the majority of people putting up 3%.
Right.
Given
3%.
City subsidies
right.
and end loans, the end loan providers are providing closing cost assistance and down payment assistance.
And your apartment, that's $1,000 they'll put up. Right.
No,
3% of 300,000?
3%, $10,000.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, so now what we're doing and what we're telling my audience is somebody can have a piece of the rock, have ownership, that's what people really want. They want to have home ownership. So for $10,000, you can own an apartment. You can have a 2-bedroom apartment.
And just under 70% of the people in this country own their own home. We're a culture. We have a culture of home ownership here.
But unfortunately, in New
Manhattan's
York,
much
we don't.
Of course,
the
Manhattan's
ownership
much lower.
in Manhattan, even in the 5 boroughs, is much lower. Correct, Jamie?
I think it's a radical change. I mean, when I grew up in New York City in the 70s, nobody I knew, owned their own apartment. And I think the shift that's happening first with the co-op boom and now the condo boom is just a really different way to think about the residents of New York City. And there was an article in the New York Sun that I found interesting about a month ago about how does that change the politics and how does that change coalitions and policy when there's so much of a higher percentage of owners versus renters over the course of a generation.
Streets are cleaner. Better policing. People take a
Buildings are
vested
kept- buildings
interest
are kept better.
in their largest investment, which is their home.
Yep.
But all of this is a
dramatic.
creature of the ease and ability of the average human being to get financing to buy a home. That's really what this is about. And if you went back in time to the 1950s, most of the people who are home buyers today would not have been able to get the kind of mortgages that they're able to get now for a whole variety of reasons.
So they'd pay 16% interest.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think two things have been proven true by this city, and we do some things well and we do some things poorly, but a couple of things we do well. Number one, we've proven that home ownership does indeed improve the neighborhoods and the environments in which people live because they care, because they're bought in. The second thing is that economically stratified neighborhoods don't work. So you can't have a neighborhood with all very wealthy people or with all very poor people. And what we have here in New York, which you'll see all over, is you'll have a middle-income housing development right next to a very high-end luxury housing development, right next to
Public housing.
projects, public housing. And we coexist well. Maybe we didn't 10 years ago, but certainly over the past
But I think
5
what you said,
to 7 years,
but
we
10
have.
years ago, 15 years ago, it didn't happen that way.
It didn't. It
You
didn't.
weren't able to build or even convert a Mitchell Llama in a different neighborhood.
But the crime stats were different. People had a perception of safety and security 15 years ago, markedly different than today. I think it's the statistics. We're like at 1/3 the homicide rate that we were. And correct me if
Even
it's
less. I live in Harlem with my family. I have a 3-month-old and an 18-month-old. In my police precinct, which is around Central Park North and West Harlem, the 28th precinct, in 1990, which is the year that the police department uses as the base year for statistics, that was when there was 2,900 murders in the city, 540 last year, a decrease of 85%, as you're saying. There were 41 murders in the 28th precinct. On the Upper East Side that year, there were 5. Last year in the 28th precinct, where I live in West Harlem, there were 5, 41 down to 5, and the Upper East Side went from 5 to 4. So the Upper East Side was always okay, but obviously in 1990 I wouldn't live where I'm living now with 41 murders, but with 5, the crime stats are comparable to the rest of the city. In fact, the crime stats in like Harlem, Morningside Heights area where we live, the national average for crime is a number called 100 on the FBI crime statistics. The crime statistic for Morningside Heights is 84. It's actually below the national average. The crime number for Chelsea is like 140. For for Alphabet City, it's like 132. So there are neighborhoods in Manhattan where the FBI crime statistic numbers are actually substantially higher than West Harlem, Central Park North, where you're building. Nobody would say, "Oh, I can't live in Chelsea; it's not safe. I can't live in Union Square; it's not safe." People shouldn't say that about Central Park North either, because the crime statistics there are lower than many of the other established neighborhoods where people don't even think about crime anymore.
I want to give you a job, Joe.
No, but with regard to other matters, you can possibly build a rental housing in the Bronx. Your land cost is less. You can possibly build it in Queens. You don't believe it?
No, because the construction costs are the same.
The same
And
everywhere.
the rents are lower, construction costs are the same. It doesn't. It
And the
doesn't
land
mess.
is priced as if to build a condo anyway. So
And we
it's,
looked at a project
yeah.
recently where literally you could have bought the land for $50 a foot, $40 a foot in Queens. But if you took into account your soft costs and you took into account your hard costs, it still didn't make sense as a rental.
But I heard prior to the show that rentals today in certain parts of the city, Delano Savoy Park is no longer Delano Village, are at $30 a foot. Or I've heard that you said on one of your developments it's $68 a foot. There's a price that you can rent these at.
Agreed, but again, it's your price at $68 a foot is not transferable to the neighborhood in Queens that we were looking at. It was a more of an affordable type housing property. The $68 a foot is in a prime Manhattan area.
Why are you adverse to anything but Manhattan? I mean,
I'm not.
he's got the Queens.
We're doing a building in Brooklyn. David pointed out to me that, reminded me that we...
Brooklyn as discovered by New York
No, I mean,
Magazine
look, I'm from
exactly
Brooklyn.
2 years ago.
I'm from
Finally.
Brooklyn originally,
If there's a limited amount of time and resources you have, and at the end of the day, you want to believe that you have a potential to exceed your projections and a potential that the market will be there if you do a particularly good job. I think your potential is a little bit less in neighborhoods where the incomes aren't as high, but you have the same construction costs, even if you're buying the land.
But
right.
you're in Jersey City. I mean, why are you going to Jersey City? You're a New York City developer. All of a sudden,
But
you are...
Jersey City, bear in mind, shares the mass transit system, and this is speaking really for both of us, since we're neighbors out there, but the Newport Path Station where we develop is an integral part of the New York City subway and transportation network. So even though it's in another state, to the average person, it reads as just another commuting place within the confines of New York.
The sixth borough. There's a sixth borough.
I call it the second borough. Well, Manhattan, Jersey City.
Don't ask Josh Musk that. Josh Musk does not believe it is the sixth borough.
In construction costs, I mean, that's the key.
It's huge
to this.
Today, you could still you're in Jersey City at 210 to 2 1/4.
That's a retail
hard
price,
construction for high-rise hard cost construction versus, and I'll ask my esteemed colleagues here, 350, 360.
Yep.
Land price is considerably less.
But, you know, Jersey City doesn't have the ambiance. I remember Jamie was on my show a couple years ago. We were joking, you know, and he said, "Yeah, oh, we have, you know, an Applebee's opened up in Jersey City."
Don't say that. We don't have an Applebee's out there.
No, we have a Chili's.
We have
Chili's. I apologize.
Chili's is by
site.
him. Yeah, I have the
fantastic.
nicest and highest rated restaurant in the state of New Jersey in seafood called South City Grill. You can take a look at
it's
Zagat's.
terrific.
It's right. I'm sure we could have lunch there one day. There are wonderful amenities out there.
And you have Dwayne Reed now.
We've had Dwayne Reed for quite a while. We have a shopping mall called Newport Center where everything Dwayne Reed, but where the sales tax are 3.5% instead of whatever, you know, outrageous fee you pay in New York. That's a city. Listen, Rome
Jamie,
wasn't built in a day.
do you live in Jersey City personally?
At least 3 days a week. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and Jersey City is developing into a really gorgeous and wonderful and brand spanking new community that a lot of people from New York are now migrating into. And at the same time, people from the state of New Jersey who want to be closer to that New York experience are moving in. We have a really nice synergy going out there.
Yeah, and what's people's opinion? You know, we spoke about Jersey City, the 5 boroughs. What about residential rental and condominiums like Westchester? You know, Mr. Capelli or Mr. Trump, who's never building, but branding, you worked for him, so, you know, he always, you know, you were the first apprentice, you know, really...
He actually really was.
I realize he was. That's why I was...
You got a good spot on him on the show.
I did not get fired.
No, he didn't get fired. Preceded probably got fired. But the idea is, Westchester, there's a lot of new developments over there. It's becoming really a very hot neighborhood. How come a developer like you, or even you, aren't in White Plains or New Rochelle?
As Louis said, you just can't do everything. You have a higher, you probably have a greater opportunity factor in New York City, where the chance of upside, the chance to exceed your expectations in New York City and Manhattan, is probably greater than in a community, you know, in the outer boroughs, which are now great and that people are doing very well. But in Manhattan, I mean, nobody would think you could sell an apartment for $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 a foot in Harlem 5-10 years ago. You're doing it today.
You know, I said this before, and I'll say it again. There are 3 Harlems. Let's remember, there is West, Central, and East. You cannot sell an apartment in East Harlem for $1,200 a foot.
That's true. I agree with that.
What do you count Fifth Avenue and 110th Street?
That's true, actually. Yeah, Corcoran is selling...
That's Central Park North. And that's it. And that's Central.
It's a different neighborhood.
That's a different neighborhood.
Corcoran is selling 102nd and Fifth Avenue for $1,500 to $1,800 a foot. 1,200 Fifth Avenue.
But that's
$1,500 a foot.
In all fairness,
102nd. You go 1 block in Madison, you're in the middle of East Harlem.
You know, you're right. But in all fairness,
one is a park.
It's on the park, and the park does have a great panache to it. And I think it's a little bit different.
By the way, and maybe we're the only, I'm the only person that can say this. We built close to 3,000 apartments in Mount Vernon, which is, you know, actually north of the Bronx in Westchester. And we've had.
When was the last one you built?
It was quite a while ago. And
were you born at that time?
Right on the fringe of that time. but the rationale is that the best fertilizer is the shadow of the farmer, and if you don't feel like you can be there to supervise your development all part or most of the time, it's not going to be a terribly good experience for you.
But getting back to your question about Westchester and the rest, one thing we've studied, and we've seen a lot of our different markets because we're a national development company, is there's a big differential today and a premium we're actually willing to pay if we can do stick-built construction, traditional construction techniques. Typically through the building code and the fire codes, you can't go more than 5 stories in most jurisdictions. You can do block and 4 stories of stick. It's interesting. Lumber is at a 5-year low versus the commodities that we use to build our gleaming towers are at all-time highs. So there's so much of a differential today in stick-built construction. And if you look at markets like, let's take your Westchester example, where theoretically you have more land. I know it's still dense, but it still is suburban. Some, you know, White Plains isn't suburban, but it is more suburban. So theoretically, you can find more dirt for a more spread out project where the construction differential may make a big difference. So there could be some very compelling opportunities. We haven't seen a whole heck of a lot of them. There isn't a whole lot of land left in Westchester, but that's where the opportunities would be, is where, in my opinion, where you can do the stick-built stuff. I think there's a more limited market for the high-rise towers in those markets.
Although we've looked in Westchester as well. In fact,
wanted to get closer to the house.
Absolutely. But we've also found recently that some large sites in White Plains on a wholesale level have gone way down in terms of asking prices. But there were sites at 200, 250,000 feet in the White Plains area, not where Capelli is building in the downtown area, but in the fringe areas of White Plains, that started off at $80 a foot, now they're down to $60 a foot. I just got it today again, it's down to $55 a foot. But when you sit down and you say, you know, they claim, of course, it's perfect for condo, but it's really not perfect for condo because of still the cost of building and the soft costs involved, et cetera.
You don't get the prices.
You don't get the prices.
You need to do a low-rise product. I mean, a low-rise product price right that you can also hedge. In other words, if the demand isn't as big, if the demand's more on rental, you can build it in stages. When you build high-rise in our business, for the most part, you got to do your whole shot at once.
You're up.
Listen, for us, it's about demographics, because even I, who am a child of the suburbs, for Generation X and Generation Y, which are the fastest growing portion of our population, they are seeking a more urban experience, which is, I don't want to commute 45 minutes to get to work. I'd rather have a 15 or 10-minute commute, spend that time with my family, and oh, by the way, if I want to go to the movies, I can walk out of my door and go to the movies. If I want to grab coffee, I can walk out of my door and grab coffee. People are moving away from suburbs and exurbs to urban living if you can provide it at a price point that they want, and you can provide the service and amenities that they need, which is low crime, great schools. If you can provide that, which New York has improved upon, then people will go to that.
You know, with regard to that question, who's your buyer in Jersey City? Do they live and work in Jersey City? Do they work in Jersey City, or are they live in Manhattan? Do they work in Manhattan?
In our market, it's interesting. It's a combination. You have a couple of different buyers. First of all, you have close to 19 million square feet of Class A on that in our marketplace, which includes some of Hoboken as well. So you have a big Class A market of office buildings with a terrific amount of employment. So you have the residual of those employees at the big firms like Merrill Lynch and UBS and Goldman. You also have people from the suburbs that are baby boomers whose kids moved out and want to be in the city and maybe sold their home for $1 million, $800,000, $1.5 million, that have made a decision lifestyle-wise. They want to be closer. They want to be in the city, but they got sticker shock and they ended up in a place that was more affordable to them. They could also park. One of the big advantages to Jersey City, for instance, is you can have a lifestyle. If you're coming from the suburbs, you have an urban lifestyle, and you can still have your car in your garage and take your elevator up to your apartment and live a little bit more the way you were used to. So it's sort of an intermediate ground, and it's affordable. So we have the suburban baby boomers. We have the young analysts and associates on Wall Street, and you have management and office staff and those same associates and analysts that work on the Jersey waterfront.
But you're a new player there. I mean, Lefrak, when your grandfather, and I love the story that how he created Newport, he was looking on the other side. He had just finished Battery Park City, the development, and he looked at the tracks in the Erie Lackawanna and the pits over there, and he says, that's a new port. Mm-hmm. In 20 years, what's the makeup today that has changed in the tendency in the rentals and the condo buildings that you have there?
You know, I mean, I think Louis just captured it exactly right. Is that, you know, listen, primarily you've got, yuppies who are working in lower Manhattan or Midtown Manhattan, and they're riding the path into work at, you pick at Wall Street firm. You've got, these kind of secondary groups, which are empty nesters and, other people that choose to live in an apartment. We found in terms of selling condos, our best audience were our renters, and we just sort of transitioned a whole group of them into buyers. And we said, look, you're going to get a tremendous discount. We don't want to, create too much trouble. Here are the prices. You guys are getting first dibs. And we wound up actually in the first of 2 condos that we built there, we sold 90% of the units to them, and it was a very simple process because they're mobile in terms of their disposable income. And what happens to people there is that after 4 or 5 years of renting, they're well stocked with cash to buy, and so they buy. And
they're comfortable with the neighborhood.
I mean, you didn't have to make a sales pitch.
This is almost identical to our Roosevelt Island story, which is that we're building 9 buildings on Roosevelt Island in Riverwalk, and we finally did our first market rate condominium project called Riverwalk Place, and we were shocked to see the percentage of buyers from Roosevelt Island, because we didn't think that our buying public was going to come from Roosevelt Island. We got 30 to 40% Roosevelt Island, and then the demographics very comparable to what you mentioned. The one thing I'd also add for our Riverwalk project, and really goes for a lot of the projects we're selling, is the volume of sales to immigrants, first generation, second generation, third generation immigrants. You look down the list of the buyers in all of my projects, and to me it is just unbelievably interesting to look at just the names and to see the impact that, from my standpoint, and maybe I'm in the $1,000 square foot and under category.
But when you started Riverwalk, which is 18 months ago, you weren't at $1,000 a square foot.
No, I was talking about all my projects. I mean, Riverwalk, we thought we were going to get $450 a foot, and the market there is now $700 to $750 a foot, which has to do with product, with what's going on the rest of the city, with the fact that, getting back to your crime statistics, I think Roosevelt Island is the safest neighborhood in the city. Although I shouldn't say that,
with the exception of the tram. I mean,
I usually throw that out. Roosevelt Island is the safest neighborhood in the city, but with this guy here holding me accountable, he'll probably tell me what my number is.
Now, that's a question for the two of you. You own all these rentals, and you own all these rentals. What's the nature of that? Do we have the yuppies? Do we have the people who are moving into the city that you were talking about? These, people who want to come in here. What type of tenants are moving into the 11,000 units today? When somebody moves an apartment, who's moving into that apartment?
It's really interesting because it is the exact same dynamic that you have with buyers. It's people who, if they could afford it, they would probably be downtown or would be in Midtown. But you know what? They want the convenience of being on the island of Manhattan, but they're not going to pay $3,000 or $4,000 a month to do it. So they're going to come to our product, which is priced in the $1,500 to $2,000 a month, and have more space, have probably a better commute because we're right on the subway line, and they're going to have an existence which is going to be similar to what they'd have downtown, but just in a much more affordable place.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I said, when we've done a few buildings as condos, we've gotten buyers who are living in every other neighborhood in the city. The same is true for our rentals in the better buildings where you're renting, 6, 7, 8-room apartments for $4,000, $4,500 a month in Harlem, but south of 96th Street, that apartment might be $10,000 or $12,000 a month. You're getting people who want to live in Manhattan, who think West Harlem is becoming a cool neighborhood. They're getting a big apartment, pre-war building, fantastic transportation access, parks all over the place. And they're getting it at a much better price.
Unfortunately, all of you have avoided the subject of the Bronx to me. You have 1,800 units in the Bronx.
That's good.
Okay? The Bronx, besides the Yankees, there are nice things in the Bronx. I don't know how come the Lefracks don't own anything in the Bronx.
We did.
You sold them probably.
Yeah.
Well, the Bronx is the next frontier. And the Bronx, I predict, will be where Harlem, it's today where Harlem was probably about 7 years ago. And hopefully 7 years hence, it'll be where Harlem is today. We have a project in Soundview section of the Bronx, which is actually very special because it's a Mitchell-Lama that we are taking out of the program, but we're converting to affordable cooperative. And we're doing that in conjunction with the tenant association, but this points to what you said earlier. Everyone wants a part of the American dream. And as long as you can provide them the opportunity to do that, they'll stretch to do it. And this was a project that was run into the ground, that was mismanaged, to the point where the state took over management.
Is that Lafayette, Boynton, and Morris?
Yes. We came in and said, we're going to invest the capital, we're going to put a plan in place such that the majority of the residents here can purchase, put things like credit counseling on site 7 days a week, do things like bring in 6 banks that are going to give closing assistance, so that this is a working class demographic, the school teachers, the firemen, the union members. Why should they have less of a chance to enjoy the American dream as any of us in this room?
And the people who don't buy will have the opportunity to continue to live there.
Oh, that's right. They're under rent stabilization for the rest of their lives if they choose.
Now, how come the Hudson Company hasn't gone? You went to Brooklyn and you've been in Manhattan and you've never gone to these other boroughs.
We look
right?
all over. We kiss a lot of frogs, as I'm sure we all do. One thing that we found is that we have an affordable housing division. Hudson's been building affordable housing for 20 years. And when we go into neighborhoods all over the city, especially the Bronx, looking to buy deals that work under all the city's programs, whether it's HDC or HPD, we can't compete because, in this point in time, every neighborhood is a condo market, and we're getting outbid by developments that are going to be either rental or condo.
But isn't that world changing today? The banks were giving a lot of money. Banks are looking at more sophisticated developers. Isn't it getting a little harder to be a developer and build a condominium?
Oh, build a condominium, absolutely. I mean,
the numbers are hard to pencil. The deals are in less exciting neighborhoods in terms of the development sites. You've had a good development bull market now since probably 1995 in terms of conversions, new construction, every parking lot in Chelsea being developed. So now it's very expensive land that's not,
no
prime.
more parking lots, no more garages,
no
more gas stations.
No, but the other thing is the barrier of entry now is much higher. Again, 2 years ago, one didn't have to have any experience necessarily develop a building, because there were the investment banks and there were the lenders out there who would assist with the new developer. That's not the case anymore. So the people who have the experience, I think, have a little bit of a leg up now, because the barrier of entry has become more difficult in the last year.
And that'll prevent too much oversupply from being on the market.
And actually, to really put that point home, for the first time in a long time, in the last few months, we've been able to actually do old-fashioned deals where we're buying dirt with the landowner who's staying in the deal.
The best deal you can find.
Okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
I think that my audience and I have gained a good perspective on what the status of the rental and the condominium market is in the tri-state region, predominantly New York City and Jersey City and Westchester. I'd like to thank Jim Simmons, Apollo Real Estate Advisors, Louis Dubin, the Athena Group, Jamie Lefrak, the Lefrak Organization, Ken Horn, Alchemy Partners, Joe Tall Prop Equities, and last but not least, as I said before, the returnee, David Kramer of the Hudson Companies Incorporated. Next month, it's close to the new year, and I'm going to put together 6 very interesting individuals to talk about where they see the market going in 2007. Thank you.
Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank, New York Branch, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding is provided by grants from C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Rosenthal & Rosenthal, Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, Titan Capital, the Witkoff Group.